Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the live chat tonight. It's a much smaller group because it's just the people in the class and members of the YouTube channel. So feel free to put in the comments where you're tuning in from if you're comfortable with it. It's a great way to meet other people in your area or climate zone. My goodness, I had a stressful couple of weeks. The bees it's like a full time job taking care of them right now. I have been feeding them so much in this past week, and the wasps, the yellow jackets, have found my bees. After I treated the one hive with formic, there was a bunch of dead bees on the landing board and on the ground, and I had swooped at the ones that were on the landing board onto the ground. And the wasps, I saw one pick up a honeybee and try to fly away with it. I saw a yellow jacket jump on top of a honeybee at a flower last week, and I saw a different kind of wasp or hornet pick up a carpenter bee and fly away with it. I am not seeing the bees on any of my flowers anymore in the garden. I'm not sure if they are distracted by the goldenrod and not interested in the flowers here, or if the wasps are just like bullying them and they are just trying to stay far, far away. Um, so, I'm here to talk about preparing your hive for winter. It's mid-September, and I don't think I will be preparing my hive for winter for at least 6 weeks, but like end of October, maybe early mid-November. But it's something I've been thinking about because, of course, we want to make sure we have what we need to treat the hive before we close it up ready, and the equipment we'll need so that we're not, you know, trying to figure it out on the last minute. And if you want to use treatments like Varoxan, the last time I tried to buy it, they were sold out in the smaller quantities. And they were like, would you like a pack of 80 for, I don't know, 100 and something dollars? And I was like, no, that's okay. Um, it was just like this huge package that they had left. So my husband made me, or is he still wrong? Some hexagon shaped shelves if you're interested in what you need to make them. He made them pretty quickly, but there are a few websites we looked at for the plants to make those fun shelves, and different ways to mount it on the wall depending on what you're putting in it so that it can hold something, like a plant or books versus a fake plant with fake dirt or something very light. Okay, so I wanted to just go over my winter plans and things that's going on right now. But of course, you are welcome to just ask questions, post comments, add in what's going on with you this time of year, because this is also just a great way for us to get to know each other and for me to hear about your bees and to talk about maybe problems or questions you have that work a little bit better if I can ask you a couple of questions and give you a more detailed response than the email. I would say that preparing your beehive for winter when you have a cold winter and a frost, of course, that's very different than preparing your beehive for it getting cooler out and a lack of nectar, but still warm enough that the bees are leaving the hive daily. And I'll talk a little bit about both. But first, I want to talk about the people that are getting the frost and the cold weather because that involves a little bit more. Um, I would say that preparing your beehive for winter time for me starts around July. That is when the big nectar blooms start to end and the hive starts to pivot from the growth mode to um, they slow down quite a bit. So July is when you would harvest honey if you were me. For some people, they have other nectars that come in. It doesn't necessarily matter where you live, but some people have different blooms that come in a little bit later. So you might be harvesting a little bit later. But as soon as that honey harvest ends, that's when the first treatment for varroa mites usually happens. But of course, doing a mite test is a better way to see whether you should be treating for varroa mites or waiting just a little bit. Because you want your hive to have a mite level of 0, 1, 2 is okay, and 3 is maybe okay for a little while. But the queen's gonna start laying eggs for those winter bees, and we want them to be healthy. The only thing is that there's gonna be a whole lot of robbing happening soon too, and so your hive's gonna get a whole lot more varroa mites. So you don't want to treat too early, or else that means you're gonna have to treat again in like 6 weeks. But July is usually honey harvesting and the first treatment for me. It's also a good time to consider whether you want to requeen, because a lot of beekeepers will pinch their queen and put a new one in this time of year. They will see how much the queen is laying, or some beekeepers, they just do it by default. Once the queen has gone through 2 full spring, summers, they are pinched and replaced. And that is because the queen will stop laying come winter and then start up again in the winter time. Here they say that she starts up around mid to late January, but that is not a time that you're opening the hive. And so you do not know if your queen is going to start laying again or not. So you cannot introduce a new queen that time of year. Can't open the hive and disrupt the brood. So, in order to ensure that your queen starts laying again in the winter time, many beekeepers will just put a new one in the fall, once their queen has seen 2 summers. Now, the lifespan of a queen, they can live up to 7 years. And so the honeybees will deal with a queen laying less and less year after year. But as a beekeeper, it's really up to you whether you want to requeen your hives that often or let the bees figure it out. The way I look at it is, if you only have 1 or 2 beehives, you're going to have to be a lot more on top of things, and you might want to manage your hives a little bit more carefully and requeen, because when you have like 8 hives, 10 hives, even 5 hives, if your hive's queen doesn't start laying again, it's not that big of a deal. You're gonna have enough hives surviving the winter that you can split and just make up for that hive loss. That's gonna be a part of your winter hive loss that year. But when you only have 1 or 2 hives, it's a little risky, because you might not have any bees to breed from and come the summertime or springtime when it's time to open up the hive. Um, but that's one of those beekeeping things that's up to you. Now, August is really when beekeepers start considering whether they should be feeding. And this would be in a syrup. And this would be if a dearth is happening, if you're seeing a lot of very little food for the bees to gather. And so you can put in a syrup of 1 part sugar to 1 part water, and help the bees. Now, this there's 2 reasons to do this. One is if your hive just is very low on food and you're concerned that they just did not gather enough for the winter. This is you just starting now to help bulk up the hive. But also, if there's very little food coming in, you're starting to see the queen not laying so much, you're struggling to see any brood in the hive, then you can feed them the syrup. But you just want to be a little careful, because if you had just put a treatment in, oftentimes those treatments can mess with the queen's laying, and so she might stop laying for a little bit or not be laying so much, or some brood might die, depending on what kind of treatment you're using. And so that might be one reason for the loss of brood. But if you're seeing this for like weeks or a month after you treated, and you're still seeing your queen bee not really laying the way she used to, then that's a sign that you can feed that one-to-one syrup that simulates nectar coming in and will encourage her to lay. And of course, then if the hive is light, that you can also start feeding them that syrup. With feeding and a decrease of food around, that's when you really want to start to decrease the entrance so the bees have less to defend. If you're seeing the entrance is really clogged up with tons of bees, or it's really hot out, you can open up that entrance. But what I like to do is give them a second entrance up at the top. And so this lets hot air out, and it's another small entrance that's easy for the bees to defend, but also up top where they're going to be storing their food. And the bees often use it quite a bit. An easy way to do an upper entrance is to have your inner cover. If your inner cover has a notch in it, you face it the notch side down so that you are giving an entrance into that box right below your outer cover. And that gives them a really small little entrance that they can use and a way to help ventilate the hives. You can also just put little strips of wood around the hive on the sides and the back and a little bit of the front and just elevate that lid a little bit. You don't want to give them a huge entrance to defend up at the top, but I would rather give them two smaller entrances to help them deal with heat than to have this one huge entrance at the bottom, making it hard for them to defend. But of course, if it's like really, really hot out and there's an intense bearding going on the hive, especially in the evenings, then open up that entrance all completely. And of course, August is an important time to do another mite test. You ideally do a mite test before treating and you do after. Treatments like Apagard, you put in for 4 weeks. But if you still have high mite levels, you would want to do another dosage for another 2 weeks. So it's, and then there's treatments like Apovar, which might have just started to develop a resistance to. And so if your the mites in your hive aren't responding, are dying with Apovar in the hive, then you have mite levels that are getting high, that are getting like 3, 4, 5, then you should look into a different treatment to put in fairly soon, or use a vaporizer with oxalic acid to try to bring down the mite levels. So that's August. Merging hives with little populations. Put in a treatment if you haven't yet after you harvested your honey. Do a mite test once a month. And start feeding with syrup if you think it's necessary. So then September we go into now and we want to do another mite test. Uh, um, and now I've moved on to a feeding of 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And that's because my hive populations are high. They're pretty good. My hive has been consolidated to one deep box at this point, just one brood box. But the majority of the frames are pretty full of bees, and the queen is laying great. My mite levels were a 0 and a 1 on 2 zeros and a 1 on my hives. Other hive had a 5. So I put in a formic acid treatment to them. And you really, I want my hives to bulk up. There's not enough food in there. So I am feeding them 2 parts sugar to 1 part water, and they're eating it really fast. I just bought 2 more 25-pound bags of sugar from Walmart. It's just the video going out on Saturday is about feeding in the fall. I show you how to make a feeder using a canning jar. It's very simple. Ooh, I also have the top loading feeders that are just like an open box. Um, or the Ceracell feeder. They all work fine, but they eat it a lot. They consume it really fast with the open feeders or the jars because I poke a lot of holes in the jars and I use 4 jars with the container that holds it. Um, so if you're interested in learning more about that, that video will come out on Saturday. So that's what September is going on. But then once you start to get ready to close your hive up for winter, you want to do one last treatment of preferably oxalic acid because you should have no brood in the hive at this point. And so one treatment with a vaporizer or the dribble method, or you can put the strips in if you like. If you're going to do that, then do it further, well further in advance than when you're going to close the hive up for winter because they are in the hive for weeks. So that's the main thing is before you close the hive up for winter, it doesn't have to be like a set time, but a week or two, you want to do some kind of treatment. You want to take the liquid syrup out once you're ready to close it up for winter and not open it up again. And you want to move on to hard candy. You can pour just dry white sugar into the hive. There's a lot of ways to do it. I forgot my shim. A shim is like a shim, but I actually got mine from Better Bee because I really don't have the time to make them. They're like $6. They're very easy to make as well. It's 2 inches deep. It doesn't have a top or bottom. It pretty much looks like a box, but it's just 2 inches deep and it doesn't have the things to hold the frames. And what this does is it just gives space in your hive. So you're going to put it above your uppermost box, but below the inner cover and the outer cover and insulation and all that stuff. And this is just where you can put your candy. Some people will just lay newspaper down and then put their shim on top and dump a whole bunch of dry white sugar on or mix a little bit of water with it to make it kind of like that wet sand consistency. Some people just lay dry white sugar on top of their inner cover. What I'm going to do is actually put hardware cloth, like the 1/2 inch size hardware cloth on the bottom of my shims. And then I'm going to make a candy. So let's see. I will be, it just, the point to this, the reason why I'm making the candy as opposed to just putting the dry white sugar on is because my hives are just still kind of low on the feed end, and I'm just concerned about that. They did not bring anywhere near as much food as I would have liked. And so in addition to feeding them, I just want to make sure that they have enough food so that I don't feel like I need to open the hive too early into the winter to check on it. I want to be able to just tilt the hive or to peek under the lid and to see that it's fine. I don't want to have to go replacing this too often. And so when you just throw that dry white sugar on, there's only so much you can really pour in there. But when you have the candy, you can add a little bit more and pack it down. So that's why I'm going with that option. The recipe I will be using is 8 pounds of dry white sugar, a tablespoon of white vinegar, and 3 cups of water. You just really want to take like little wooden blocks and put them in a few spots, like in the corners and so on, because you want to make sure that the bees can get up to get to the candy. You don't want them to just be hanging out on the hardware cloth, like licking it from the underside, hanging upside down. Peaches says, is there a time in Florida that we don't inspect the hives? We normally don't have really cold temperatures until mid to late January or maybe early March, and it's normally only a few days at a time. You do not want to open a beehive. So the bees start to cluster up around 57 degrees Fahrenheit. So you definitely do not want to open the hive up if it is 60 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. And so for you, that time of year, even in Hawaii, there was never a time that it was too cold for the bees to be flying around. It was never, I'd say, below 50, even at nighttime. Maybe for a small period in January, it might be in the 40s at nighttime, but it was always in the 60s, 70s in the daytime. And even then, I took an entire month off to go to New Zealand and the bees were fine. I took a month off for my wedding and the bees were fine. I took over a month off to have a baby and the bees were, I was pushing it because it was end of January into February and the honey season, nectar was starting to come in. So during this time when the bees are flying around, or it's kind of getting to that cluster period, you should not have to open the hive, I'd say, more often than every 2 weeks. Beekeeping can be exhausting when you are in a warm climate. I found that to be the case. It's like I love the bees, but like after 10 years, I was just like, just give me 3 months off. Like just just please cluster up and leave me alone for a little bit. But you can go 2 or 3 weeks without checking your hives. And so even if you do have that cold snap that's coming for a few weeks, it shouldn't be a problem. And you're just going to have to time when you check your bees around like when you have that nice day. You also want it to be like low wind and sunny. The bees want to keep the brood at like 90, somewhere around 95 to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And so when you're opening the lid, even now as it's in the 70s, I try not to open the hive for too long because we really don't want to let all that heat out. So you really don't have to, if you're going to open your hive during the winter months, even if it's warm enough out, you should have a reason. You don't really need to check on the queen's laying and things of that sort. You don't need to make sure you see eggs and larvae and prevent swarming. You just want to give them enough food with the brood section that they're not starving, at least one frame of honey for every 3 to 4 frames of brood, plus maybe a little bit extra. And keep an eye on it and make sure that they don't need some extra frames. I like to just keep some frames of honey in my hive to prevent small hive beetle infestations. So that's the other part. You just want to make sure they also don't have too much food that infestations can occur from wax moth and hive beetles. So you just don't want there to be frames that have like almost no bees on them. Now, if you have a full box and like the last frame in the box has almost no bees on it, but the rest of the box is very full, that's not a big deal. But if you have like a super on top of that and you have like 5 frames of drawn out comb, and like almost no bees walking around, then you're just asking for it. And there's a good chance infestations are going to occur. So, in the warm climates, you really just want to do quick inspections to make sure there's food and that there's not too much unused comb, honey, or pollen that has no bees to guard it. And that is it, and close it up and be done with it. So beekeeping is very minimal at that time, and you just don't want to bother them too much. Uh, there is just, you want to make sure that you are uh, treating for varroa mites. So in Hawaii, I only treated once a year, and it was in December for that 4 to 6 week treatment before my nectar flow started in February. And that's so you don't have to worry about treating as often in the warmer climates, but you do have to make sure that a treatment happens before the nectar flow starts. And maybe as two treatments happen, like after the nectar flow ends, and maybe once again before the next one starts. It really depends on how high your mite levels are. You just want to time it so that you don't have to put a treatment in when honey is coming in. Now, Laura says, I'm wondering when to feed in Florida if expecting a fall nectar flow. If you're expecting a nectar flow in fall and your bees have enough food, and you're not concerned about them starving, I would not feed at all. Um, Feeding is really only done to prevent starving, which in my case is my concern for wintertime, is a wintertime starving, and to encourage the queen to lay, which would usually be in the early springtime, especially if a hive is new, or in late summer, early fall. If you're seeing your queen lake just laying little to nothing, then you can feed them a one-to-one her a one-to-one syrup to encourage her to keep laying so that you have a good population of bees to get you through the winter. If you're not needing those fat winter bees to cluster up to help your hive get through the winter, then that's not really a concern of yours in the late summer, and you don't have to worry about feeding your queen, unless you're really concerned that the population is just like way too low for any beehive. Okay, so back to preparing a hive for cold climates. There is the outer cover, and then you want insulation. It's really important to insulate under the roof so that the cold air meeting the hot air doesn't produce a whole bunch of condensation that drips down in the middle of the beehive onto the cluster. And so 1 inch thick insulation, you want it to not be absorbent. You do not want this to absorb the moisture, because after months of being in the hive absorbing moisture, it is going to get moldy and gross, and it is going to cause more harm than anything for your bees. But this one is from Better Bee, and again, you can get this on your own from a hardware store. You want 1 inch thick and cut it to size. Better Bee sells them for under $10. I want to say $6, but that's how much I said the shims cost, and I'm not sure if they both cost the same amount of money. Under $10, more than $5. And this is cut to the exact size needed to fit inside your telescoping outer cover. And this is a good place to put it. You put it inside your outer cover, and it gives your hive extra insulation. If you are using an insulated hive, like the Apame hives, one of my hives is insulated. It's that white foam hive. You might have seen it in some of my videos. This is not necessary. But for just regular telescoping outer covers that do not have insulation, this is very important. Some people make insulated inner covers, and they glue insulation to their inner cover, which is another option if you like, but I don't really see why you would need to do that to your inner cover, because sometimes you use inner covers for other purposes, and so I don't know if I want to glue insulation to my inner cover. But some people put insulation in their hive year round, and so you guys in Florida, especially when it's hot out, insulation is actually good as well. And those insulated hives aren't just good in the cold, they're good in the heat too, to help keep your hive from overheating. I'm going to see how I should buy. I don't know if they make well, it just wasn't really that hot out this summer, and my bees aren't in an area that gets a ton of sun. I'm planning on moving them soon, so they get more sun come the winter time, but partially because the one tree by them, I didn't expect to put so much shade out with the leaves on it. But I didn't notice much of a difference in like bearding and fanning. I didn't really see much bearding or fanning from the bees this summer. So I really can't say how well the insulated hives work with bees dealing with the heat. But the insulation under the inner under the outer cover can help for heat and cold air. Now you want condensation in the hive. That's going to happen anyway, but you want condensation. I actually saw condensation in my hive today. um, I was kind of surprised because it was actually, I'm not sure how cold it got last night, but yesterday it was in the low 80s. But I guess it's getting cold enough out at nighttime that there was condensation in the hive on the walls, and that is good. You do want condensation in the hive. The bees need water. And so when condensation drips off of the inner cover, the insulation or whatever is, up there, however you're setting up your hive, and it does form, um, and it drips down, if it falls into your sugar or that fondant, cake, whatever you want to call it, candy board, it's all sugar and water. It can absorb that. And not only is that an extra layer of protection so it doesn't fall onto the bees, but that water isn't lost. And so when the bees consume the sugar, they're getting some moisture that way. But they also will lick the walls of the beehive. And so that brings me on to the next one, which is the just overall insulation. We have the insulation under your cover. That's a given, and everybody does that. Whether or not you want to provide additional insulation for the walls of your beehive is up to you. Now, in areas such as Maine and Alaska and people in Canada, then there are, not everywhere in Canada, but there are areas where it gets very cold and people have to insulate their hives. But it is not a requirement to wrap your hives around the boxes. There are many people that don't, and their hives overwinter in cold areas. So the benefit to wrapping a hive is that it does give it that extra little bit of insulation, but you just don't, you want to make sure that there is ways for that moisture to escape. You don't want to insulate your hives and just make your beehive get all mushy and wet inside. So there has to be ventilation in the hive, and there has to be places for that moisture to go. So in nature, beehives are usually in these cavities. They are in trees, and these trees are much thicker than this thin little pine wood that a lot of beehives are made out of. Some people will use corrugated plastic that is black and put that around their hives, but that part is not a requirement for insulating your hives. Um, but again, you do want ventilation. And so, of course, you want that lower entrance. You want a way for bees to get in and out of the hive through the bottom, but you can block off a good part of it so that it's not totally open, but like half the size. A lot of people will take their entrance reducer and flip it around so that the entrance, the wood part, the solid part of the entrance reducer is on the landing board. And this is just so that if there are dead bees blocking the bottom part of the entrance, that bees can still get out off the top. However, this will prevent you from being able to clear out the entrance if you are to come along and clear it out. But then other ways you can give your bees, you want two sources of ventilation. You want a backup source of ventilation. You can flip the notch of your inner cover down so that they have that upper entrance. You can put your bees on a screened bottom, but block off the majority of the screen with a corrugated plastic, like, those boards you get for the sticky boards, and just allow like a half inch or 1 inch gap on the edges for a little bit of the screen. There's a few different ways that you can provide ventilation for your bees. Some people insist on giving their bees an upper entrance, and other people say that it is not good to allow heat to escape from the upper entrance. So when it comes to that, really the best thing to do is to talk to local beekeepers and see what the overall recommendation is. Um, I know beekeepers in Ohio that have an upper entrance and their bees do just fine. And then there are beekeepers that do not have an upper entrance and their bees do just fine as well. So I don't think when it comes to that, I don't think that either way is going to make or break whether your bees survive the winter. Some of the few musts of preparing a hive for winter to ensure that your bees survive is healthy bees. The bees cannot properly cluster up. They're not strong enough to keep that cluster and survive this stressful time when they're sick and when the hive is full of viruses or they had a parasite feeding off of them in the pupation stage. So that's where keeping your varroa mite levels at a 0 or 1 throughout this like August, September, October period is just crucial. And it's more important to ensure that is happening than to stress over whether you should have an upper entrance or a screened bottom. I will say that if you do the screened bottom, which I'm going to be doing on at least one of my hives, in addition to blocking off a good amount of the screen with corrugated plastic, another good thing to do is you can take roofing paper and you can wrap it around, kind of make a skirt for the bottom of your hive. Also, make sure if your back has like an opening, some screen bottoms have openings to put that board in or small hive beetle traps. There's just like this block sometimes that it comes with. You want to make sure that that back part is blocked off, but you can take that roofing paper and you can make a little skirt. And so that's to just ensure that like on those windy days, that you do not have these winds just blowing up inside your hive through the bottom of that screen, uh, and that you're not, making this big swampy mess inside your beehive by over compensating and just wrapping it up and not allowing any kind of ventilation. So moderation is key. Don't overdo it with the wrapping. Allow ventilation. Just make sure that it's not like when it gets windy, you're not gonna, the bees aren't going to be having these big cold bursts coming in. Wind breaks are always great. I am going to be moving my bees to an area that's kind of like a wall of bushes. It gets lots of morning sun. There's no trees blocking it, so I don't have to worry about any limbs falling on it when we get lots of snow. And there's a nice windbreak. Windbreaks are great for helping your bees and then can prevent you from needing to feel like you have to put some kind of insulation around your beehive. Um, and that's really it. You want lots of healthy bees. If your hive is very low on population, you can consider overwintering them in a nuke. However, that might require insulation around it because that little nuke box, I don't know if that can handle. I don't know much about overwintering nukes, but another option is to merge it with another hive. Make sure you have a nice strong queen. If your queen was iffy all year, old, ideally you would have requeened in the late summer or used formic acid as a treatment, and it's been known to get rid of some of those iffy queens for you. Has been my experience. You want to make sure that there is plenty of stored food by feeding them that 2-to-1 syrup come now if they don't have those frames of food, and then taking it out before it starts to get cold out and replacing it with candy or just dry white sugar, fondant. My bee club, they order it, and I think it doesn't. It comes around January-ish, and they distribute it to the people in the club that ordered it. And you can order it from beekeeping supply sites. The fondant. It's just all pretty much sugar bricks that are put into the hive as emergency feed up above. So it starts out, you have a box for the brood, the cluster. Then you want to put your frames of extra honey up above that. And you want that in the center. This box does not have to be totally full of honey. You want the honey in the center. The club, they always described it as a bell shape. You want the cluster and then this like upper section for food. You don't have to fill that whole 10 frame box with food. And if you have lots of honey like frames on your medium frames full of honey, but not so much brood frames full of honey, then put a medium box with those medium frames up above. It really just depends on what size frames you have for your food. This is really just think logically. Don't go too crazy about the rules. And then up above that, we are putting our emergency sugar feed. We are putting insulation, we are putting a cover, and we are making sure there are 2 points for ventilation. At least one of them should be a place that bees can get in and out of the hive. It's important that they be able to do their cleansing flight. And so there's going to be lots of bees dying in that early winter, late fall. So either you need to be able to get something in there to scoop out those dead bees, or the opening has to be able to be high enough that the bees can get out, even if there's dead bees down at the bottom, or there has to be another way for them to get out of the hive. I am going to have that screened bottom and just block off a good portion of it because I really like the idea of having that extra ventilation for the bees down at the bottom, because cold air sinks and hot air rises, but also all that condensation that's forming on the walls as it starts to build up and potentially drip down, I'd rather have go out of the hive as opposed to pooling up inside the hive, because you really just don't want stuff to get mushy and moldy. I am not a fan of those quilt boxes and things that absorb the moisture, because you really have to go in there and swap it out as often as needed. And I don't want to have to constantly open up the top part of that hive and have a big mushy box full of wood shavings and things of that sort. But lots of people do successfully overwinter using quilt boxes as well. Gary says that he's made winter patties in winter and early spring instead of candy boards. It's mostly sugar, some honeybee healthy, and a little powdered protein powder pollen substitute in wax paper. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, I've never added the honeybee healthy and the pollen. I have heard of some people adding pollen, so that might be a good idea. Honeybee healthy, I think, is primarily just to make sure it doesn't go bad, just like you can add vinegar, I believe. I think that's the case in both the warmer months and the colder months. But I'm not positive about that. I would just assume that if the water's dripping down on that sugar and it's just sitting in the hive, even if it's cold out, it's warm in the hive, and that can potentially start to go bad if you don't add vinegar or honeybee healthy to it. Those both extend the shelf life of the sugar. So good point about the honeybee healthy. Sylvia wants to know what the ratios would be. Well, when it comes to honeybee healthy, they always say it's like 1 to 2 teaspoons per quart. And I'd say that is on the extreme end. Um, when it comes to feeding in the warmer months. In the colder months, I would think it would be like a teaspoon per gallon. Well, I guess you're not doing liquid syrup, but you could just add like a couple teaspoons to it. I would think would be enough. But Gary, if you happen to know the ratio, let us know. All right. So if anybody has any other questions about their bees, about what I talked about anything related to bees and beekeeping, let me know. Real fast. Oh, didn't mention, but in addition to putting your hives in the sun, if they aren't already in the sun, you can also put like black roofing tiles on the lid to help just um warm up the hive in those colder months, because most of the time we want to paint our hives light colors, but you can help attract sun and warmth by doing things like that, or the roofing paper around some of the boxes, just making sure to not block up any of the ventilation or entrances. Oh, and then there's also the mouse guard. So, can make one pretty easily. A lot of beekeeping kits come with them because they are so cheap. You can make one out of hardware cloth. And this goes on often a little bit before you're even preparing the hive for winter. So, when you prepare the hive for winter, that's something I really can't answer when you're going to prepare your hive for winter. You want to do it before it's getting so cold out that the bees are clustered up. You want, oh, thanks, Gary. He added in the comments 5 pound, 10 pound, or 25 pounds of white sugar. Use a tablespoon to a quarter, half a cup, honeybee healthy. And the AP23 substitute is the pollen substitute. What's that? I think Man Lake sells it, or Daydant, one of those guys. It's all kind of similar stuff. Now, the mouse guard, you can just take thumbtacks and put this over the entrance. You can staple it. You can go like this and shove it in there. This is to prevent a mouse from making the beehive their home in the colder months. When it's warmer out and the bees aren't in a cluster, they can usually, scare out the rodents by stinging them. But when they are clustered up, then the mouse guard is good. So you want to put this on not too early, but you want to put it on possibly before you're even preparing the hive for winter. If it is already getting to be to the temperatures off and on that you do not want, that the bees won't be able to kick the rodents out all on their own. And so for those of you in the warmer climates, winter time is a time of getting a teeny tiny break, but it's just a time of preparing your varroa mite plan. You might be treating once or twice, either once to give yourself enough time to treat before the honey starts again in the late winter, early spring, or you might be doing it after you harvest and then again before before the honey season starts again. And whether you need to treat once or twice just is with a varroa mite test. If you are getting levels of numbers of like a 0, a 1, a 2, then you're fine. Even a 3 is okay. It's just I want to go past really like a 5 as the threshold, because once the levels start to get too high, even though you lower your mite count and you're getting a mite count that is low, the damage has been done. You already have tons of viruses in your hive. You have weak brood, and that is no good. And that's going to take your hive a while to recover from. So, someone in Australia had told me that the numbers they had been told was like you should treat once your mite count is like 12 or 15 or something. And I was like, once your mite count is at 12, your hive is potentially going to be absconding. That was an impression I was under. And if your bees are taking off and nobody is left behind, which we call absconding, the number one cause of absconding is high varroa mite levels. It's not that a hive swarmed. It's not that they didn't have enough room or that they didn't like a smell. It's their last resort is to abandon the brood where the majority of the mites are and start over again. Um, so in addition to that, keeping your hive's mite levels in the lowish end, but you don't have to have them at the 0 or 1 level like the people with the cold winters, is just managing food. Make sure they have enough food, but not too little. And keeping an eye on the areas that don't have a lot of bees. So ideally, you would be consolidating after the last nectar flow. I think for a lot of you, that is the Brazilian pepper tree. In Hawaii, it's referred to as a Christmas berry. And uh, you want to just consolidate the hive once they are consolidating themselves. So you will see the queen laying less. You look at inspection sheets, you write down how many frames of brood you see, and you will see less and less brood. Maybe you're going to be at the point that you're wondering if there's even a queen because you're hardly seeing any eggs or having trouble seeing any eggs or small larvae. And that is the point at which you can say, okay, let's consolidate this hive. You might have a box that has so little bees walking around on it, or there might be a couple frames with bees walking around on it, but then in your brood box, you have 2, 3, 4 frames with hardly any bees walking around it. That is the point at which you take out the frames that I consider empty. They might have comb drawn out, but there's no brood inside the cells, and there's little to no food in the cells, and like less than 50 bees walking around it. You want a frame to be covered in bees. You want there to be 500 bees on each side of this frame. It can be a little bit less at that time of year, but if you are seeing frames that have almost no food on them, no brood inside the cells, and like 50 bees or so on each side, take that frame, give it a good shake over the inside your beehive, and take it out. And then you can consolidate 2 boxes to 1 or 3 boxes to 2. It's going to be a time that you do not have to worry about swarming. But of course, you want there to be places for your queen bee to lay. You might even see dead drones outside the hive. You might see absolutely no drones, adult drones around, or no drone pupa. And it's a time to really just open your hive once, twice a month, just to make sure that they're still there, they have some food, and nobody's trying to attack the hive, and that's it. There's really not this. I mean, I personally don't worry like that year round. When it's not swarm season, I'm not too concerned about whether I have a queen or not. It's she's probably there. You don't have to go meddling through the whole hive and annoying them just to make sure. It's really during the times of year when something could happen to the queen, when they're more likely to take off, or when you're preparing the hive for winter and you need to know whether you need to merge hives. So you really have to worry about whether that queen is there or not. So that's the difference between warm and cold climates. You guys in the warm climates definitely have it easier, quite a bit. But the downside is that you have more mites because there's no frost to kill them, and you're not bringing down that population, the wax moth, small hive beetles, and you have to deal with pests a whole lot more than the people in the colder climates. The The upside is that there is never a time in which you can't open the hive and just check on them or make a change or do something about it. And really keep your eye out for the small hive beetles because this can be a very big time that they will take over a hive. Do not give them pollen patties unless you really think that they need it, because that is a really excellent way for small hive beetles to start an infestation. Cheryl says, I had two mites and a 233 bee sample. Did you count every single bee in that sample? I, um, I, uh, I don't have the patience. Well, I also don't have the time. I have little ones running around asking questions every 5 seconds. Thinking of hitting them with oxalic acid vapor every 4 or 5 days for 5 times. Is that too much? It should cover a whole brood cycle. Yes, that is correct. That is what you do when you want to use the oxalic vaporizer and you have brood present. Um, yes. It is impressive that you got 233 bees in your sample. Even though they say a half a cup of bees is 300 bees, once I am putting that half a cup into the test, I'm like, this nowhere. This is not 300 bees anymore. Anyway, I had to read the question. Is it too much? It's not too much if you haven't done it yet. Now, varroa mites, as far as we are aware, haven't developed the resistance to oxalic acid or formic acid, but it can be too much for the bees' health to give them too many treatments. So it really just depends if you've treated, because it is not good for them to give them too much oxalic acid. You don't want to keep treating them with it like every month. Same thing with the formic. I had just read that talk from Heather Bell, I think her name is, from Formic Pro. She gave a talk at my bee club, and it was really interesting. Uh, she she says that she only uses formic to treat her hives, and she does it in the spring, late summer, and fall. But she said that after you're done a treatment, um, even if you were using the two pads for 14 days, she's like, just leave the hive alone for a month. Like, just leave them alone. Don't bother them. And then after the treatment is out, like, leave them alone for a good month before you were to treat again with formic or anything else. It's the oxalic acid vapor, really the oxalic acid in general does not disrupt the hive the way formic does. The formic, the formic really is destructive. I like combined disruptive and destructive into one word. I had a long day. I tried to get rid of a wasp nest, a yellow jacket nest, for the second day in a row after dinner time. So I tried to kill them yesterday, and it did not work. I saw seven queen yellow jacket bees. I have two in my freezer. Long story. And then I killed another five after I moved the log over. I was afraid to do that part. I tried to cover up their entrance and make a trap over it, but there were two other entrances to this hive, and they are all over my bees. They're like starting to bother us when we try to eat outside. They're all in the grass in our lawn. And I knew the nest was there as of July when my daughter stepped on it in flip flops and was stung 6 times. It was a terrifying experience because she's only 22 pounds and had never been stung, and I didn't know how she was going to react to this. So anyway, it was, I tried to kill it again, and um, The bee suit works really well, is all I have to say. I was a little concerned about the ventilated bee suit. My bees don't sting me through it much, but I didn't know about the yellow jackets. Anyway, it's been a long day. The oxalic acid vaporizer, you just don't want to use any of these treatments too much in a row. So if you haven't treated at all since the spring or at all this year, you're fine. But it really just depends. To do that treatment for 5 times in a row after saying you used Formic a month or so ago, I would not do that. That's a little much. You might be able to just get away with doing it once, and it might be okay. A count of 2 isn't terrible. It's really on that threshold. A 0 or a 1 is ideal. That's what you want to see. I saw a 5, and now that is like really bad. That's also my Italian bees I got in that package from Tennessee. So I'm not surprised, to be honest. It's kind of what I expected from the big beekeeping operations in the southern states. The bees are terrible about dealing with varroa mites on their own. They just kind of bring in lots of honey and they're very calm, and they just seem to be like okay with whatever. Anyway, it would cover a brood cycle, but don't do it if you plan on using the oxalic acid vaporizer in like a month or so to close up your hive for winter. You don't want to overdo the oxalic acid. Honestly, I would actually put in an aprivar strip and see how that works. Gary, that's what I did. Well, I didn't do 5 gallons. I mixed 2 gallons of water with a half a cup of soap and poured it in the hole. But what happened was, what I had read to do was to take weed cloth, to put that over the entrance, lay some bricks around it, then cut a little slit, and to pour the soapy water in the hole so that the wasps get coated in the soap, and apparently they wouldn't be able to fly and it would drown a whole lot of the wasps. But they said to put the weed cloth over it to also prevent wasps from flying out. So one, there were like there was this log that their entrance is partially under, and I didn't move the log because I didn't know. I was just afraid that I was going to move the log and it was just going to be this. There were like a good 5 wasps staring out at me when I first just like walked over to it. They were like seriously guarding this nest, and I didn't want to move the log, and apparently putting this cloth around it without moving the log just made it really hard to block the entrance, because part of the entrance was like right up against the log. And then once I did that and I poured the water in, they were still just getting in out through that other entrance. There's like 3 holes. It was just huge. A lot of wasps were just like coming out of the hole, but like dying and soaking wet. I saw 2 queens flee out, and I crushed them. But then it just like there were still just wasps flying around, maybe the ones that were coming back, the foragers, and there were still just some coming out. I don't know. I'm not quite sure the issue, other than I don't think enough of the soapy water got into the hole because I had the weed cloth over it. So maybe I'll go back tomorrow, not put a weed cloth over it, and just dump a whole bunch of soapy water in there and hope that it kills the rest. When I moved the log, I killed 5 of those queens. They were just like huge and creepy looking. So I can't believe there were 7 queens in that nest. That seems insane. Um, my other concern is that one of the queens got away, and maybe they'll be able to make another nest nearby, and just walk over to another little space. It's tricky when they're in the ground like that. You can't like spray them with anything. It's also not my property. It's like a couple neighbors down. I just didn't bother them asking them if they were okay with it because I was like, I mean, why would they not want me to kill a wasp nest in their backyard for free? It's kind of like in this back section that's just like wooded and can't even really like see the house from the area. Uh, but for some reason, those wasps just scare me. I'm not a fan. But now that I see how well the suit does, they don't seem very intelligent. It's interesting. Honeybees, like they know how to get in that little crevice where your gloves are, and they will like get in there. They will get, even when they're not even that mad, they would get in that tiny little spot. If I didn't have my zippers like totally zippered with the flap over the zippers, someone would like get in through that zipper. They would like climb up that little spot where your pants come over your shoes. Like they really are so good at sniffing out your weak spots. And so I was, or if you bend over, then they'll like get you on the back. So I was afraid the wasps were going to do this to me, but they were just like flying around me or just like landing on me. They just, or biting me. They were nowhere near as clever at getting into my suit as the honeybees are. Um, I hope I didn't jinx anything. And now tomorrow they've learned their lesson and they figured out ways to get to me. But as of today, they don't know what to do with somebody in a bee suit. It's kind of confusing to them. All right. I will try again, Gary. Thank you to everyone that tuned in. You're always welcome to send me emails when you have questions. Um, I know that getting ready for winter can be kind of confusing. I'm going to have nightmares tonight. I am going to have nightmares about those queen bees crawling around. They were scary. Maybe I'll post a video to my YouTube shorts. I wonder what my children are going to think of me when they look back at the child. Come walking through the backyard. My kids are by the house out finishing dinner. They just finished dinner, and I have this bottle. I first tried to trap them. I had made a bottle, took a 2-liter bottle, inverted it so the spout that the soda pours out is pointing in, and put that over the entrance. And so then I was hoping that the wasps would come out, and then you like pound on the ground and the wasps come out and go inside the trap and can't figure out how to get out. But I didn't know that there were 2 more exits like 4 inches away. And so wasps were coming out there and then they were coming out next to the bottle. And that was terrifying. So I had the bottle that I was planning on taking home when I poured the soapy water in the nest. And I grabbed one of the queens and I threw her in the trap just because I wanted to show it to my husband and look at it because it's kind of interesting. And so I come walking back to the house and I have this like bottle with these 2 queens walking around. And my son, I was like, you want to see? We're gonna see something, and I show him, and he's like, "Whoa, that's gross!" And my daughter refused to get within 5 feet of this bottle. She was just like, but she was the one that was stung or bit, stung slash bit 6 times a couple months ago. So she's a little on this scared side. Yeah, it's smart to be a little scared of yellow jackets. They are interesting. I did put out some lures for them all around the yard. The best one happened to be, I just ended up putting one in between my beehives, and only 2 bees drowned in it, but within an hour it caught 10. The other ones only caught like 10 or 15 over the course of the entire day or 2. I used the one from Frederick Dunn's video, which was apple cider vinegar, apple juice, sugar. He uses grape jelly. I don't know. It kind of seems like a silly combination. Grape jelly seemed not necessary, but it it got some, but it also, I was just standing there and watching them, and I put the dish detergent on it, but some of them were still just drinking at the bowl. think is just too easy to stand on the side of the bowl and get in there. So I just kept poking them with a stick and shoving them in the bowl so that they would drown. Um, as, but with a hive that big, setting out traps like that isn't going to be enough. It really need to get rid of a nest when you have a nest that size so close to the beehives. I don't know if raccoons can do much damage. If I were you, I would strap your hives down. That's what I have on my hives. I have ratchet straps. My hives are on cinder blocks, so it's pretty easy to strap them through the cinder block. And then I think you're probably fine. Entrance reducer would maybe be good too. But I wonder, I would think that if they started to put a hand in there, that they would sting their nose and they would probably run away. Oh, they're going for the grapes. Hmm. Well, it was nice to talk to all of you. Can't really see you. Thanks for tuning in. And in 2 weeks, I'll be going live for everybody. And until then, feel free to send me questions, email, or to log into the Facebook group and post things to there, whether it's just bragging or questions or interesting articles. There's lots of fun things that people have been posting there. Gary says, I always suspected a hot dog in my homemade traps. They want protein until it's fall, then they look for sugar, soda cans. Are we talking about raccoons or wasps? Probably both, but probably the wasps. I did try cat food. Um, they are definitely like everywhere, those wasps. I saw one, it like went to the landing board of the hive where there was a dead bee and just picked it up and flew away. And all the dead bees that had fallen on the ground after the formic treatment was attracting the wasps. And there were like 3 or 4 of them just like on the ground, like picking up these dead bees. It was weird, or like just biting them. And oh, suspended a hot dog. Um, um, I can only imagine what I would attract if I suspended a hot dog. But so if you suspend the hot dog in the trap, is it like the soda bottle traps where then once they get into the trap, they can't get out? Because I know that cat food attracts wasps as well. It's just the traps I made where I put protein in there. Um, they just they just didn't seem interested. They seemed interested in the open air traps. They actually seemed really interested in sugar. They're like mildly interested in protein. They were coming over to us when we were eating dinner, but as soon as like they're just landing on me when I'm checking the hives. They're like landing on me and licking me. They're like on my suit, as they're on any equipment I have in my garage. They're flying in my garage, landing on beekeeping equipment. They are just on top of anything that has sugar on it, like really fast. I did try to make a trap with where they couldn't get out and just put some soda in there. But the tricky thing is that you don't want to trap the honeybees. So that's what the vinegar is for. And I'm wondering if the vinegar is just deterring them, or maybe they're just not interested with so much other food sources. I don't know. I really just need to kill the nest, is what I think. I think that the traps are just not really as helpful as just like getting that nest. You know, they can be as big as a volleyball on the ground. I am really curious to see what this nest looks like. I should bring my phone and video it. Ugh, I really should have gotten it when it happened in July. I'm sure it's just getting bigger and bigger. But it wasn't a problem for my bees, so I left it alone because I really just don't like to kill, insects. I have a bit more fun this time of year. I get out my hand torch. So, like, while they're flying or just to the nest? So, the hand torch, it's a little dry out for the hand torch. It's a little, um, risky. Alright. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for the suggestions. Flying or on the ground. That's I can't do that. I just push them into the syrup. Good night, everybody. See you next time.